So John Lynch.
Okay, I'll rush through these slides quite quickly because it'll get us a chance to catch up on the interesting things. As we've talked about before, different sites do different sets of sequences, and it has there'll be a little bit of data flow issues and setting up the scan issues for each site that they can each work out to try and optimize things themselves. But as the scan, can I have the next slide, Lucy? There's an imaging CRF that goes around the clinic with the patient. So it will be completed on paper at the time of acquisition by the MRI tech, passed back to the clinic coordinator. It's a 4-page form. And if your site isn't doing a specific section, just mark not applicable. And the site coordinator will then have to ensure that that data is entered into the online coordinating center database after the acquisitions have been completed. Can I have the next slide, Lucy? Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is the clinical spine MRI. If you just click next, it's, these sequences on the right, it's important that if one's not done, the patient's uncomfortable, they don't want to stay in the scanner any longer, just mark that it's not done so that we at the coordinating center know later that it's not an incomplete transfer of images, that the images actually weren't acquired. Next slide, please. It's the same issue for the advanced spine. If things weren't acquired, we need to do it. Also here, UC Davis and Irving just record not applicable on this page. The next slide, please. For the MRS, we've added a question here. If you just click next, Lucy, about whether the person has an L6 or not. Because if you do end up scanning L5S1 or L5S6, the NOCIMED protocol requires specific labels on the images related to which level was done. So that it encouraged the MR tech to always fill those things in so that we know what exactly what was available. Like I think we discussed earlier, we're only planning, I think people decided maybe only plan on scanning 3 discs.
Thank you.
Only scanning 3 levels for this. But there might be a disk that's too compressed or damaged to scan, in which case you can do an alternative. But like with everything, if things weren't acquired or the patient's uncomfortable or wouldn't stay still long enough to do the scans, just mark that things weren't acquired properly. If you run out of the 30 minutes to do this section, don't delay the fMRI by keeping on going on this, just mark that you couldn't acquire things. And then can I have the next slide, Lucy? And then quickly here, it's, there's a set of sequences Joseph just mentioned. If you just click next, Lucy. The one thing here is that you might try do the MP RAGE sequence. And if you can't get a good one, then you might not do the rest of the exam. So there's little questions that the MRI tech will have to complete if things don't go perfectly. The patient might just refuse to stay in the scanner long enough to do this, especially if they're in a lot of discomfort. Can I have the next slide, Lucy? So yeah, the current plan is to save the acquisitions to an external media. At UCSF, we might do things differently, but for the other sites, save it to external media. The site coordinator to ensure that the media and the paper tracking form are matched and transfers to UCSF happen. There'll be a secure electronic transfer method to send the images to us. UCSF IT is currently performing some audits, security audits on various methods that we might be able to use. We should know more next week about what options are available. And the rest of these slides, they're all about the QC we'll do on the scans once we get them. We can probably go on to the next slide if you want to see. We'll consider images and tracking data as dirty until we get a perfect match between them. And then once we've got clean images, they're ready for analysis. If you move on to the next slide. Oh, that's the end of it, yeah. So once we've got clean images ready for analysis, we can then send off the MRS images to NOCIMED. We can send off the fMRI images to the people who are going to do the analysis of those. We can send the clinical scans to Thomas Link's group in radiology for their readings. We can send the T1 row and the ideal images off to Roland's group to do the measurements. And then we get the results back at the coordinating center, and then we can pass them off to the various people doing the analyses or the overall data coordinating center, which I think you said was in North Carolina. So that's a little bit of a quick run through of how we'll handle images and data. and we'll try get some more details to people in the next week or two. Thanks.
John, I have a question.
Yeah.
So the custom of labeling discs as L6S1 is something that I've basically never seen except at UCSF. So we need to make sure that
NOCMED have some instructions on how to label things in their operations manual, and I just kind of took things from that. So I will look through, maybe I'll send you a copy of what their suggestions were. But they like things labeled in a specific way for each level, and if the person's got an L6, they like it labeled a different way. So yeah, right.
Do any of our radiology colleagues see an opportunity for confusion there with that terminology of L6?
Isn't there an agreement sometimes that you say the one that is closest to the sacrum is defined as L5?
Yeah, that's what most places do. But UCSF, for some reason, they like to use L6, which as soon as someone tells me what the L6 nerve innervates, I'd be happy to adopt that.
Let me look at the NOCMED documentation then about how they describe things, because they give some examples, and maybe we can change our terminology on the CRF. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, as long as we're all consistent, that's fine. But
yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, John.